Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. The Malting Barley Blueprint, aligning breeding, farming and market needs. Big questions indeed, and vital for the malting barley industry. And to help answer those questions, we have Dave Griggs, Technical Director from Crisp Malt, Charlie Catto, agronomist with Agrii, and Paul Bury from Secobra Research. And we are at the perfect location to ask those questions, recording live at Secobra's Spring Barley Research site in Norfolk. Dave, let's start with you. Can you give us a bit of insight as to, what are your customers looking for from a malting barley variety? Why is it important to get that right?
Right, okay, so anyways, we've got two main segments. I mean, we're supplying malt into the brewing industry, we're supplying malt into the distilling industry. Different end user requirements. I mean, the distillers are very much focused on alcohol production, so they're looking for varieties which naturally give them lower nitrogen contents, higher extract availability, so they can achieve the litres of alcohol they're looking for in the distillery. Brewers are a little bit more holistic. I mean, they're looking not only for alcohol, they're looking for flavour, they're looking for head retention, they're looking for colour. So we need a little bit of a different barley to supply the brewers' requirements. No hard and fast nitrogen content requirement, quite a range depending on the type of beers which are being made, be it cask conditioned ales or some of the sort of global lagers which are being used. And the whole assessment of varieties is really based around meeting those end user requirements. So the testing systems are based around that to ensure that the likes of the varieties that Paul's breeding, that Secobra bringing through, meet those requirements.
Sure, and from the distiller's perspective and the brewer's perspective, how is their need changing?
I guess there's a very big push around sustainability. The carbon footprint of malt, the major contributor is the growing of malting barley. So we're looking for varieties which are higher yielding, better nitrogen use efficiency, lower agrochemical inputs. So we're looking to our breeding friends to see what we can do about it. We know that yield is the major determinant of carbon footprint. So the continuous improvement in yield for the farm is really important to us.
And from the farmer's perspective, for the farmers listening in today, what does that actually really mean in terms of the sustainability requirements and carbon footprint that you're looking to have your eyes on to be able to have that data? What does that actually mean for the grower?
Well, it means some changes possibly in agronomic practices. It means focusing on yield and the practices that will come with that. I mean, we've got to focus on regenerative agriculture as well, and to a certain extent it's going to become that sort of license to operate, because we're getting this push down from our customers that they're wanting lower, they want carbon neutral. So at some point in the future we've got to get to that point.
And Charlie, I guess we'll bring you in a bit later on and talk about that, but that's really interesting what Dave says there about that license to operate, which is different to you can earn an additional premium. Is that a real concern for farmers?
I think that the license to operate idea, I mean, a lot of them are already doing it. They're already doing good IPM, the buzzwords, regen, but a lot of farmers who are in mixed situations or have used cover crops or FYM or digestate. So farmers are, aware that they need to look after their soils and be soil resilient, more so than they've ever been. So I think that comes naturally alongside what the distillers and the maltsters are looking for. Yield again is the main driver for the whole industry. So the higher the yield, the lower the carbon footprint will be. So, and that comes through genetics as well as agronomy. So I think the whole thing actually works quite well together.
So we'll come back and explore that a little bit more. But before we do, Dave, I know you sit on some of the brewing committees, the micro malt committee. Yeah. Tell us about what is that looking for and looking at, because obviously it's going to be future looking, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now we have a very strict process in the UK in terms of evaluation of new varieties which are coming through from the individual breeding programmes. So the Malting Barley Committee is responsible for the approval of new varieties, and So at the early stages, we're doing small-scale laboratory micro-malting tests, analysis on the malt that's being produced from that, and that takes the varieties to a certain stage in the process, and then the better ones will end up getting commercial malting and commercial brewing and distilling trials. So the brewers and distillers are relatively conservative with the small c. They're not enthusiastic to necessarily change varieties that quickly, so we really need to be able to convince them that the new variety is going to give them something at least as good as, if not better than, they're using already. So what we need to do is just to maintain that quality, as well as obviously work with the growers to make sure that it's working for them as well.
So from the seed breeding perspective, Paul, at Secobra, what does that mean in terms of what you're looking for and looking at, listening to Dave and also listening to the concerns from a farmer's point of view?
Well, I think it's the same as situation we always have been in, that as a breeder, we've got to try and balance the needs of the farmer, because if a variety or a crop isn't attractive for a farmer to grow, he's not going to grow it at all. He's going to grow something else. So we have to balance the grower's needs against the end user's needs, as Dave outlined, and hopefully find varieties that are suitable for both. And that's really no different to the first domestication of crops, going way back. It's just a bit more targeted, a bit more scientific nowadays.
So Paul, in this chart that you've brought here, which I know you've used it on trials, tours and demos before, tell us a bit about what's the point of this? What are you trying to demonstrate?
Well, I think this demonstrates quite well that breeding isn't a magic switch. It's a continuous improvement in varieties, which is often difficult to see in the short term, but if you look over a longer term, it's more obvious. So this is some work that was done by the AHDB in 2020 and 2021, where they had in trials varieties that were registered in the 1990s, in the 2000s, 2010s and 2020s. So almost a 25-year span of varieties, all grown in the same trial under the same conditions. And when they measured the yield, it was fairly obvious that the older varieties were lower yielding and the newer varieties higher yielding, and the progression over that 25 years was pretty much 2 tonnes per hectare. So I think that demonstrates that, without breeding and the introduction of new varieties, if growers were still growing those older varieties, there'd be 2 tonnes per hectare worse off for the same inputs, the same costs.
So what you're saying then, it's from the farmer's point of view, listening here today, it's a progressive process rather than an overnight suddenly coming along with a magic formula.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the AHDB recommended list, it's often difficult to see big differences between the varieties, but if you look at that over a length of time, the difference is, progression is clearly there. And the introduction of new varieties is absolutely key to the goals that growers have and end users in improving output per hectare, and in that way improving the sustainability of the crop itself.
How important is that balance of yield and quality for that farmer's resilience financially?
Yeah, I mean, the end goal is to have a high yielding crop, 7 tonne a hectare with good bushel weight, and low end to hit the sub 165, especially in the north for the pot still market. So that's where the breeding comes in, that we want a good high bushel weight variety that stands well, so we can push it a little bit more. And then we also want an earliness, so we can cut it before we get sort of the autumnal weather, and also have that the output. So we want a high tillering variety that responds well to trace elements, to nutrition. So that's the sort of main element of what we're looking for. And then in terms of that, the higher the yield, the better the sustainability element on it. So the breeding has been exceptional in the last, when I first started it was optic, and now we've gone right through and we're into onto Laureate, and now onto like the Diviner and Belter, which are another step on. So it's every sort of 5 years or 6 years we see this sort of big leap again, and it's good to see the progression that's been made, not only for growers but for maltsters. So.
Yeah. And for the end user, Dave, is it important that farmers are able to have profitable, successful farms?
Oh, absolutely. We need malting barley, so it's a pretty small crop, and if we don't keep our growers happy, then we won't be making beer and whiskey. So, and I think the grower likes the product. He likes to be involved. I mean, it's great when we get farmers going around breweries, farmers going around distilleries. They can make that connection to where their malt is going. And I think we can sit down. The farmer can sit down in the pub and have a pint and say, well, my malt, my barley's probably gone into this pint. Then it's a really good it's a good story for them, for the whole supply chain.
Yeah,
really. So.
For information on Agrii's spring barley varieties, visit agrii.co.uk/your-crops/cereals/spring-barley. Paul, from a seed development, a variety development point of view, what's the current trend in terms of what you're looking for? I understand that it's that dual purpose between growing for the distillery market and also growing for the brewing market. How does that sit with you?
Yes, well, as a breeder, we've obviously also always got to look at what the end market requires and include those traits in our varieties. So increasingly over the last 4 to 5 years, the malting barley market has moved towards varieties which are suitable for both brewing and distilling, so dual use varieties. And that trend will certainly continue, and that's very much our focus. The two processes are actually very different in terms of production, so we have to balance the different quality requirements all within one barley. So it's not absolutely a new thing, but a trend that's increasing. A lot of talk is about the resilience of varieties for growers as well. How reliable those varieties are in the field for growers, not just a high output in good seasons, but when conditions aren't particularly good, you've got more resilience and more stability over years, and that's something that we're very much trying to focus on as well. So testing varieties over a number of years and different environments to see varieties which are quite stable in performance, both grain quality, malting quality and yield. Disease resistance, of course, comes in as well. Newer diseases like, Ramularia is not new, but there's been a lot of talk about that in the north. It's a difficult one to crack, but we're still looking into that as long as the breeding resistance for other diseases. So in spring barley, things like net blotch resistance are becoming more and more important. For whatever reason, net blotch seems to be increasing in the crop, so that is an area that we're focusing some of our research, trying to understand disease resistance genes and sources in other material and bring that into our new varieties. So a real mix of priorities from yield, quality, grain quality, stress tolerance and disease resistance, and all that makes a very interesting life through the summer, thinking about all those things.
Sure. For the farmer, they'll say it's more than interesting, it's really critical that I've got resilience built into those varieties. So how high up your agenda of seed breeding is that resilience?
I think it's key, really. I mean, we test varieties over multiple environments during our breeding and selection process, and obviously a variety that performs well at a range of locations is a variety that's very easy for us to say, yes, we'll keep that.
Charlie, let's bring you in here, because you have perhaps, and your colleagues as agronomists have got a real challenge there of helping that farmer succeed in growing that crop with whatever the weather and the climate can throw at it. So what's the biggest challenge for you when you're going along trying to support and help these farmers grow successful crops?
I think, as we were saying earlier, it's a bit about risk management, getting that planning in early, that we know what we can put before it. So if we're going to use cover crops or digestate and build up that soil resilience for a start, and then taking out again other risks such as manganese deficiency. Do these fields, or generally most fields in Scotland, respond to sort of manganese seed treatments? if it's going to be dry, should we be looking at putting zinc on as well, or getting the zinc on early to increase auxin production in the root zone, so we can get the roots down, and using the right nutrition, starter fertiliser, getting the right amount of N and P on. You can see it in a really dry spring like this. If you've not put the right starter fertiliser down with the seed, the crops suffer, and it's trying to get that crop established. I always say to growers that establishment's 90% of the battle. So if we can get that crop established, we can get that the green cover over again, we get the plant meeting in the rows, keep that moisture in, especially in a year like this, and then go from there. And then it's a case of reacting to the plant strengths for disease resistance, the weather, and then obviously the amount of sunlight we're getting in.
So before we go to the pub to warm up, because it is quite cold, isn't it, Dave?
It is quite cold.
It is quite cold. And where everybody's going, well, I thought it was summer following yesterday's hot weather. I'm going to put on some extra jumpers. But Charlie, coming down, it was actually warmer up in Aberdeenshire.
Yeah, it was. I think it's 20 degrees in Aberdeenshire at the moment, and it feels about 6 here. It's not often you come 300 miles south and it's colder than where you come. But yeah.
Sure.
So, but before we do go and warm up, the real critical question that you would like to offer to growers who are listening today, what do they really need to get right and take away to not necessarily work on, but what should be their prime focus that's really important for the future? Let's start with yourself, Dave.
Well, I think for us it's got to be the move to regenerative agriculture, and sustainability is so far off everyone's agenda, and I think we've talked about license to operate. I mean, it is going to become, it's going to be an absolute requirement, because we're not going to be able to sell malt to brewers and distillers if the barley hasn't come out of regenerative agriculture systems. So that really is has got to be a focus, really, and that comes down to the right varieties and the right agronomics and the right looking after soils. So that's really where I think we've got to see some real effort going forward.
Sure. And driving towards that sustainability and achieving those targets. Charlie, let's come to you. That must be where you can really help farmers.
Yeah, I think so. I think between rotational advice, our data we have on cover crops, on working with material like distillery digestate, that sort of extra little bit of detail we can put in through seed treatments, through seeing these varieties early. We're seeing these varieties 5 years down the line before they're commercially available, so we know them before they hit farm, so we know the agronomics behind it. So all these little things, if you want to make advancements, you have to do everything right. I always say to growers, don't just broad brush approach. Let's get down into the fine details. Let's treat these things like a thoroughbred rather than an old clapped out banger.
Sure. Thank you ever so much, Charlie. Paul, let's bring you back, because actually, to finish with your way of summing up this podcast, we are on a Secobra trial site here in Norfolk. It's where you do a lot of your work. I know you've got many other sites. But what's your message to growers to help them achieve that sustainability, achieve a good successful crop and a good outcome?
Well, I think as Charlie said earlier, growers essentially have been growing crops sustainably for many years, or forever. It's what farmers try to do. The message I would say is to growers, don't be afraid to try new varieties and see what they can do to help you with those goals.
Thank you, David, Charlie and Paul, in helping us unlock those questions around malting barley. Do stay tuned here on Tramlines with some great episodes ahead, as we ask, should we reconsider oilseed rape? And as we delve into what's new in regenerative farming at Groundswell. If you have any questions for our experts that you'd like answered, email them in to info@agrii.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.